Today's topic is why do we celebrate Black History Month and is it still relevant today? Today I have with me our co host, and that is Sean Taylor, Jamila K. Wilson, Marwin Spiller. Dr. Marwin Spiller will be leading the discussion today, and I will yield to Dr. Spiller.
Thank you, Shama, for that introduction. I'll get right into the conversation. In response to widespread segregation and discrimination, as well as a continuing narrative of Black inferiority and white superiority as displayed in such problematic films such as The Birth of a Nation and Gone with the Wind, as well as other cultural productions. In 1926, historian Carter G. Woodson declared the second week of February Black History Week. It was scheduled to occur between the birthdays of Negro abolitionist leader Frederick Douglass and President Abraham Lincoln. In 1976, this became Black History Month. The intention of the week and then the month was to acknowledge both the accomplishments and the lives of major African American figures. While thought to be important in 1926 and 1976, the improved social, economic, and political status of African Americans, including the election in 2008 and 2012 of President Barack Obama, have moved many to question its relevancy today. In this segment of Speak Up, we will discuss this very timely topic. I will start with a question to our co-host, Jamila. What is your position on the relevancy of Black History Month today?
Well, Black History Month is definitely relevant. It's important. It's valuable for people to know and understand its history, culture, and contribution to the world. I like to use or reference Dr. Du Bois quite frequently, but he spoke on this very issue that we are living in a world that will cease to want to be Negro and become white in action, if not completely in color. And so we really need to begin to examine if that prophecy has taken place, and if so, what are our next steps to rectify that? Because he states that what he has been fighting for, and along becomes my fight, is that the possibility for Black folk and their cultural patterns to exist in America without discrimination and on terms of equality. So however we see Blackness to be, it is to be accepted, loved, and appreciated. And I think Black History Month helps us maintain that relevance.
Okay. Shama, do you believe that as long as there's Black inequality, that Black History Month is necessary, or is it possible that it serves some other purpose?
I would say as long as there is Black inequality, it's necessary. And that just goes back to Carter G. Woodson. The reason why he actually founded Black History Month was never for it to be something to continue on this long. It was to ensure that other races, and to be a reminder for us ourselves of the accomplishments that we've had, of our spirit of entrepreneurship, of our work ethic, of the way that we were family oriented, and so on and so forth. So it was his plan that, after that point, once we got so integrated into U.S. society, there would be no need for Black History Month anymore because our contributions would speak for itself. Unfortunately, we are here in 2015, and it doesn't seem like we have progressed too much further than 1926 when he first started it. So right now, I think that it is still relevant because we haven't made that progression.
Okay. Sean, would you agree with that?
With Shama's point or with Jamila's point?
Well, we'll go with Shama's point. I want to come back to Jamila's point with regard to W. Du Bois.
I definitely agree with part of it as far as, us there's being some similarities between when Black History Month was first conceived, or Negro History Week was conceived, and where we are today in 2015, in that the ones that have struggled, the Black folks that have struggled, continue to struggle, whether it's due to lack of education or low income or lack of economic opportunities or mass incarceration. Right. So there's definitely some similarities between 1926 and 2015. To your original question, is Black History Month relevant? I mean, I think it's probably relevant. I'm just not sure how impactful it is, because I feel like Black History Month obviously is 1 month. It's the shortest month, 28 days. I feel like it's been kind of just commercially co-opted and very much become scripted.
Okay.
So it's like, you know, the kids are learning about Black History Month, so they always learn about Martin Luther King. And they learn about maybe George Washington Carver and the peanut.
Right.
Or maybe even Benjamin Banneker.
Right.
But are they going to learn about, you know, Bishop Richard Allen,
Right.
Who is one of the quote-unquote founding fathers, the Black founding fathers, and the founder of the AME Church? Are they going to learn about the history of America and how Black people contributed to that history?
Right.
Or is it just going to be about we were slaves and now we're free, and MLK gave a speech and now everyone has a dream?
Well, to your point, I mean, certainly there's a lot of discussion that Black History Month only leave us with a set of names with no context.
Right.
I mean, we got a lot of names, we got a lot of a lot of stories, but what do we do with that? Does that contribute to Black empowerment? And certainly, Carter G. Woodson had hoped that we would be inspired by the accomplishments of those who came before us. Do you believe that that's happening for us? Do you believe that young people are actually inspired, encouraged by those who came before them? And so therefore, those names, however hollow they may be, have a point, serve a point, and we should continue that tradition?
Well, I would say that Dr. King is extremely relevant. In fact, we don't even know Dr. King. We've been sold a piece of a dream about someone in order to sell McDonald's hamburgers or whatnot.
You're speaking to the commercialization of
Sure, right, yeah. We don't know King. So, in fact, we need to just take a few breaths and, breathe a little bit and learn who King is, particularly King before he is assassinated.
Right.
He is challenging the war in Vietnam. He is challenging capitalism. He is demanding equality for workers. You know what I'm saying? So, no, we still need to spend a little time with King. We still need to spend a little time with Rosa Parks, because she did more than just not give up her seat on a bus. This woman was trained as an activist. She was trained as a community organizer. She was doing work around addressing rape, that women were being raped in the South. So this woman was who we all should be seeking to emulate. So we're not done. So this is why this is very relevant. What we need to begin to ask questions is, who's controlling the narrative?
Right. And so, I mean, and that's a good point, because if we argue that we don't know enough about King, we don't know enough about Rosa Parks and others, I mean, whose fault is that? Is that our school system, our teachers, our families, our community? I mean, Shama, who do we point the finger?
I think it starts at home. I think education starts at home. I don't think that people should send their kids to school and expect them to get a full knowledge and understanding of who they are and what their culture is. I think we as parents, for those of us who are parents, need to educate ourselves so that we can pass that down on to our children. So by the time they get to school, they already know or whatever. The school is just reinforcing what they already know, if they're even doing that.
Right.
So I don't put the blame on schools. I put the blame on us as parents.
Yeah, and therein lies the problem, at least for me, because if we think about the idea of the civil rights movement, I mean, there was a lot of progress that was made. Many perhaps feel that I don't want my kids to live through the same struggles that I lived through. I want them to have a better situation, so perhaps I'm going to work hard to send my kids to schools that are in our community, maybe a suburban community where they're not getting that information. And so, and because you're living in a community, you're busy working, you're busy trying to provide, is it fair to say that it's parents' responsibility to teach that history? Are parents teaching American history, parents teaching British history, or is it the fact that because we're African Americans, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our kids get the history that they need to get, and how much responsibility is that on the schools? And is it fair to say that, we have progressed, and because of that progress, there's some things that perhaps are not as important because of that progress?
Well, I think
I said a lot there.
right.
I'm like, which part did we address?
That's all right.
But no, I think I understand where you're going with this.
Right.
But I think there's definitely, like Shama said, responsibility on parents.
Right.
No question about that. But it's like you said, there's a lot going on. People are working. They've got other responsibilities. So it's hard to give a full and thorough history lesson
Right.
to your child while you're trying to, take care of other responsibilities,
Right.
especially if you have more than one child. But then as far as the schools, we have to understand that the founding fathers all died in America, but
Right.
none of them were born in America. They were born in British colonies.
Right.
So America is a result of those British colonies
Mhm.
and white men coming together and saying, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
So we can't expect for the schools, which is a product of those British colonies and those founding fathers, we can't expect them to teach our history. They
Right.
don't know our history.
Right.
So if we're trying to seek this equality, which is elusive at best,
Right.
segregated at worst,
Right.
then yes, we have to put some of the onus on the schools. We have to look into the curriculum and say these things should be implemented into the curriculum. So I think it's the responsibility lies on the parents and on society as a whole.
Right.
But we have to understand that we make up that society, and if there's things that we don't appreciate or that we disagree with
Right.
about our schools and the way our kids are being educated, especially in public schools, then we can do something about it.
Right.
I mean,
Go ahead.
sorry. I mean, but I don't know. The way that I think about it is, do I really want someone who is not black teaching my child about Black history?
Absolutely.
Do I want anyone
You
that's
know,
black
like,
teaching my
If
class?
it's true
I don't-
history,
But my thing is, like, at the end of the day, we're not teaching their kids. You see what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it's one of those things where it's so heavily one-sided to favor a race already. You know what I mean? I don't feel like they would do it justice, in my opinion.
They,
So-
meaning,
European white teachers at schools.
okay.
So
what's the alternative, that they don't teach it at all?
no, I'm not saying that they don't teach it at all, but I don't feel like it should fall on like the school should be responsible, or it should be, one of their. I think if they do have that class, it should be taught by a black person.
Well, I mean, that's definitely an argument that I hear a lot in academia as they're becoming, PhDs in AFM studies, and there are a lot of white people who are PhDs in AFM studies, and the reality is they will be in those classrooms teaching all children, and what we want to do is ensure that they know what they're talking about.
But that doesn't mean that they're going. I mean, I understand that it's going to happen, but it doesn't mean that they're going to deliver it.
I'm not even certain that there will be. I agree, and I do want to speak to that because Dr. Du Bois says very beautifully what is so valuable for the black parent and their child. But what I do want to say, though, is that there are some black folks that I would not want teaching black history to my child who has sort of self-hating or self-deprecating ideals about blackness, which has been, shaped, understandably, by the culture by which we live in. So, blackness is seen from a space of negativity. And so it is about the content that we provide. But really quickly, Dr. Du Bois says this, out of Immortal Child, says, out of little, unspoiled souls rise up wonderful resources and healing balm. Once the colored child understands the white world's attitude and the shameful wrong of it, you have furnished it with a great life motive, a power and impulse towards good, which is the mightiest thing man has. How many white folks would give their own souls if they might graft into their children's soul a great, moving, guiding ideal? So it is definitely our responsibility to tell our child who they are.
Good morning. You are listening to Speak Up, and we are currently in discussion about Black History Month, and is it still relevant today? Before we went to break, Jamila was giving us a piece from Dr. Du Bois. Did you want to go ahead and
Oh no, that was the final statement. But what he ultimately is saying is that it is our responsibility. It's a gift, in fact, that we impart upon our children to help them understand who they are and that their legacy, their birthright, is goodness.
Right. I think, Sean, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, and I totally agree. And it's like I said initially, I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's that, yes, it does start at home, and we need to be the ones teaching our children about our history and all of American history and even world history. And that we can't just say, okay, it's going to be on the school, and the school can't say it's just going to be on the parent. At the same time, I mean, we go to what do we value nowadays? And, I mean, Carter G. Woodson was educated at Harvard. Like, he's a very intelligent man. How many people know who Carter G. Woodson is? Probably not a lot in this younger generation, but I bet they know who Dwayne Carter is or Vince Carter, you know? Right. So it's like, then we have we kind of dropped the ball there?
Yeah.
Because as parents, we haven't imparted that to them, and we say, celebrate Black History Month. Go ahead, baby, celebrate Black History Month. But it's like, where did that come from?
Can I go back to something that Jamila said prior to going to break, and that was, I believe it was something along the lines, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there are some Black people that I would not want teaching my children Black history. But it goes the same way for white people. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like...
Yeah, I think we can't assume just because someone's white, they don't know what
take
they're
the lesser
about.
evil.
Right.
I'll take the Black person, but still...
But I think we have to teach them the totality of the history.
No, 100%.
And teach them to think critically and say, this is how things work. This is how the country was founded. This is who it was founded by. Mm-hmm. You know, just like with the Emancipation Proclamation, like, yeah, it freed the slaves, yeah, and it was all happy, but that the conversation can't stop there because we know that's not how it worked out. Mm-hmm. You know, there's the Civil War, there's Jim Crow, now there's mass incarceration. So we have to teach them to view the whole piece, or the whole puzzle, I'm sorry, and then to question the pieces and see how they fit together. Mm-hmm.
Right, and I think, that brings me to another question, that if we argue that the whole goal of Carter G. Woodson was to one day, this week, this month, would one day be diminished, it wouldn't be relevant. And certainly, if we're moving to a more integrated society, a more global society, should we still be talking about Black history as opposed to American history, world history? And are we doing a disservice to our kids by sort of instilling this identity that is Black in a context where the world is moving?
Well, the Chinese are definitely not teaching their children how to be American. And the Jewish are not teaching their children how to be whatever. Mm-hmm. The Russians definitely are not teaching their children to be, something other than what they are. And as, African Americans, we have a very special gift, again, birthright upon us. And so it is invaluable, it is necessary, it is intentional that we teach our children about who they are. And again, to go back to Dr. Du Bois, he indicates that the centrality of civilization is Africa. And everything that has come out of Africa since the dawning of modern culture is relevant and on the table right now. So when you're talking about Black history, you're talking about world history. And that's the context by which we must prepare our children and prepare ourselves for.
Right, and I agree with that. I want to shift gears for a moment to talk about the issue of whether or not Black History Month in its current sort of manifestation, can it be just a mere distraction to the other issues? I want to say real issues, but to the other issues. As some would argue that we have a lot of issues that are going on in the community today. Social inequality, economic inequality, unemployment, prison, poverty. Should we be talking about those issues as opposed to those historic figures in the past?
I think both and. Mm-hmm. Like, I think we have to talk about the past. You have to know the past and understand the past in order to be able to be successful in the future. Because ultimately, if you don't know, who came before you and what went on prior to you getting to this point, you're going to have a much harder time pushing towards success in the now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need both and. You need to know about the people who blazed the trail before you,
Right.
but then we also have to address the issues that are current to us today.
Right. But would you agree or disagree that so often Black History Month spends an extreme amount of time talking about those historic figures and not enough time talking about the issues that confront Black America today? I mean, is that a fair critique?
Well,
I guess I'm a little confused. Are we saying we only talk about the ills that are imparted upon the Black culture in America? We should only talk about that during Black History Month, February? Like, this should be an everyday conversation about mass incarceration, about the state killing Black people, unemployment. This should be an everyday conversation.
Right.
So I guess I'm a little confused.
I raised that issue because there's a lot of literature that suggests that young people are somewhat disconnected from Black History Month. Young people feel that we're talking about these historic figures when we're not talking about things that are relevant to them.
I agree, and I think the media has desensitized our kids to the point where, and even us, to the point where we hear it, we see it, we know it, but we're not feeling anything.
Mm-hmm.
We're not connected to it in any way.
Right.
And I think, that is a main part of the problem right now, is that there's no connection. So even though you might hear about Martin Luther King, you don't identify with him enough to where it makes a substantial difference to you in the now.
Right.
Or it helps you make better decisions than you would
Right.
make prior to hearing about Dr. King.
Right.
Like, for some reason, it's not to the point where you're hearing these things that, about all of these different people who have made contributions to our society, and you're wanting to go out and do better.
Right.
So I think we have a huge problem with
Yeah, we're
We got you.
desensitized, right? But then who is teaching? Who is teaching our children if we're so desensitized? Like,
I'm
this is.
cropping that out.
I don't like to. I try to kind of remove blame to a certain degree because we know the problem exists. Then let's focus on the solution.
Right.
But if there is this desensitization or whatever, desensitization, whatever.
Dr. Spiller.
Right.
Give us the right word.
Right. But being desensitized, if we know this, then we need to begin to ask, well, how did this come to be? Like, who are teaching our children?
Right.
What is the content by which they are teaching? And then we have to take onus. So maybe we're not blaming, but whoever's standing, you now pick up the baton and start teaching these kids correctly and helping them understand who King is, who Malcolm is, because their spirits are still alive. I don't want to say, were, because what they wrote, what they fought about, it's the same thing we're fighting about today. And they have laid a blueprint, like Shama has said. The past gives us all the information we need in order to not make the same mistakes. We can start blazing new trails. And that's what we should be doing. So we pick up where we obviously see there was, a gap.
Yeah, but can we move forward without connecting those gaps? And Sean, how do we make that history relevant so that we can move forward, we can connect those dots to young people?
Right. Well, I think it's kind of like Jamila said earlier,
Right.
About us getting to know these historic figures like Martin Luther King.
Right.
And it's not just about seeing Selma,
Right.
or watching the I Have a Dream speech.
Right.
People need to really get to know him. They need to really get to know W.E.B. Du Bois, or get to know Rosa Parks,
Right.
or Bishop Richard Allen,
Right.
Benjamin Banneker, Barack Obama.
Right.
People need to really understand what made them tick and kind of how they came along. And in order to respect that, like, we talk about Dr. King, and, like, think about it, he's a doctor. Like, this is a very highly educated man. Even Malcolm X, whether you agree with him or disagree with him, in prison, he went through kind of a not a self-imposed, but an exile where he was just learning and just soaking in a tremendous amount of information. And he traveled and he spoke and he just went out and did a tremendous amount of things. But once again, he read a lot of books and was just very highly educated, although he self-educated. So I think we have to help them understand. We have to put some make these characters not these like mythic icons, but make them flesh and blood characters. And there definitely was a disconnect between the civil rights movement in the 60s and where we are now, because the media or the mainstream uplifted Dr. King, and then it was like, well, who is next?
Right.
And it's like you and I have talked about offline. It's kind of like, you know, you had Spike Lee coming along in the late 80s, early 90s, and he's just making all these movies and doing these great things. Made Malcolm X, by the way.
Right.
But then it was like, who's the next great director?
Right.
African American director. There's like, who is it? I don't know.
Right.
You know, like, are we cultivating the you know, the next generation? Are we making these instead of like having to teach our history, are we making them a part of our daily life? Do we have rites of passage? Is this a part of the dinner table conversation? I think that's the way that you ultimately elevate the conversation and make it integrated into the fabric of our everyday lives.
So I think, you know, because we're running short on time, I guess if you want to kind of say what would be your solution in order to minimize, you know, the lack of, or minimize the disconnect that we're having with our people today, connecting with the past. What is each one of us, you know, what is the solution, or what are the ideas that we have to bring about a change in this particular situation?
Well, I think what, you know, Sean was saying, this has to be a part of our everyday being, our everyday existence. But it is the responsibility of those who know, it is their responsibility to ensure that this information gets out. Just as, you know, the greats who came before us were insistent that their message still be relevant. You know, they spoke to what was happening right now, but they were also speaking to us in the future. And those who have that understanding must do all in their power to disseminate this information, to continue to pass on the legacy. And so, you know, that's an individual choice. That's what Michael Jackson says, you know, man in the mirror. You know, if you know, then you must share. You know, so it is our responsibility. We are not waiting for anybody. We are.
Yeah, and I would sort of add to that. I think that we certainly have to.
Go ahead, we got one.
Encourage our kids to read more. We have to encourage that, and we also have to encourage our kids to be more critical, to be critical thinkers. Certainly, that's a valid point. And I'll leave it there.
I agree with Jamila and Dr. Spiller, and the only thing I add to that is just to teach our children that they are valued, they're valuable human beings, no matter what their skin color is, but that they are very valuable and that people who look like them have contributed to this world in very valuable ways, and that they can do the same. Oh Lord, please don't let me be less on this love.